and TV studio for another session of our program. And this session is going to be devoted to IWC with the presentation, the announcement of an amazing round the world project. And to host it, I'm going to invite on stage James Holland.
Thank you all for coming. This is an incredibly exciting project that is about to be launched at the beginning of August this year. And this is to circumnavigate the world with a Spitfire. It's never been done before. You have to remember, ladies and gents, that a Spitfire has a range of about 450 miles. And they are planning to fly this around 22,000 miles all around the world, stopping off in numerous places, major heritage sites the world over. And the principal partners are the very brilliant IWC watches of Schaffhausen. And to talk about this and discuss this, we have not only Christian Knoop, the creative director of IWC, but also Steve Brooks and Matt Jones, the two pilots. So Christian, Steve, and Matt, please come and join us.
Hi, James. James.
Christian, I want to start with you. I mean, IWC has a world-renowned reputation for incredible watches, but not least your aviation range. And I'm just wondering where that spirit of aviation, that desire to get involved in this particular brand of watches first came from.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that this is not just a marketing stunt, but this is really something which is linked very much with our brand history. We have a rich history in pilots' watches, which dates back to the 1930s, when the former owner, who had two sons which were educated in England and acquired their pilot's license, convinced their father to do pilots' watches. And from this starting point, IWC produced pilots' watches, and in the 40s, we were in close contact with the British Ministry of Defence and supplied watches to the Royal Navy, to the Royal Army, and to the Royal Air Force. And this is one of the most iconic pieces in the history of IWC, the famous Mark 11 watches, which were basically in service till the 80s. So there's a strong relationship ongoing between British aviation and IWC Schaffhausen. And so this continued actually when we acquired the license for the name Spitfire about 20 years ago, and had various watches in our collection named Spitfire. So this year we said, okay, we have to dedicate this pilot's watch to the Spitfire watches, and this is what we do in our booth, and you're more than invited to see that in live. And we have an amazing collection we put together, and we bring this together with the Spitfire, the longest flight. And this is where the whole idea started, actually, when Steve and Matt approached us. There's a long-going relationship with Boultbee Flight Academy, and these two gentlemen had an incredible idea we were totally blown away with when they approached us and said, okay, we want to fly around the world with a Spitfire. We have an amazing plan to restore a historic Spitfire and to do a flight attempt around the world. Does IWC want to become our partner? And we said, okay, this is a perfect match. This is our history. This is now turning into something which is happening here and now. And this is still a real endeavor. And we are an adventurous brand, and we stand for active. But
it's
engineering and
it's
design.
A blend of heritage and the present, isn't it?
So before we actually talk about this, I want to show a short film how this came about.
It all started with an idea, a dream, a vision. As the time kept running, the vision became clear. Filled with passion and confidence. We all embarked on a journey. But the real journey is still to come. This is the Silver Spitfire, and the dream takes flight.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if that doesn't get your heart pumping, I don't know what will. I mean, how inspiring is that? And Christian, I think there's some other little bit of synergy, because as I understand it, your first aviation watch was in 1936, which was, of course, the first flight of the Spitfire.
That's correct, absolutely. That's an interesting coincidence, and what's particular there, that also this whole idea of aviation watches nowadays looks like a style exercise, but back then it was really due to technical specifications. The aviation watch was something pilots needed in the cockpit to monitor actually the flight time, to navigate in the air. So this was an essential tool for every pilot who goes into air. And back then the watches were made of different materials and made to different technical specifications. That actually making an aviation watch was quite an effort also on the technical side. This required new materials. This required new testing procedures. This required new designs also on the dials to make dials legible in difficult circumstances at night. To have cases which can withstand the tough circumstances in a cockpit or as an aviator when you bang against the inside of the plane or something.
So robustness, the punishment that the watch is going to go through as you're pirouetting around the sky, doing loop-the-loop barrel rolls, negative G, positive G. It's got to be able to withstand all those. The mechanism has to withstand all those pressures that are being put onto the watch, as well as the pilot.
It was demanding for the watch movement, but also for the case, to have a case which is scratch resistant, which is waterproof, because you also have the effect of moisture and corrosion, especially in the context of an island like Britain, where you have a lot of water around, and so this is special requirements. Absolutely.
But I think one of the things that really strikes me is that if you look at that original 1936 watch, and you look at those watches that IWC are producing in the 1940s and 50s, there is a timelessness to it, to excuse the pun, that is still relevant today. I mean, you could put on that watch from 1936, and if I told you that it was built yesterday, you would never know. And it's that sense of timelessness, the nod to the heritage, but combination with the present that I think is really attractive. And that, of course, applies to the Spitfire, which is a wonderful apparition of majestic curves and kind of feline beauty. And chaps, I mean, you'll know, the Spitfire is rightly the most iconic aircraft in the world still to this day, surely.
Oh, it's surely the greatest aircraft that was ever built. There's always an Everest in every game. And in the aviation, I think the Spitfire is recognized by all pilots as being the ultimate flying machine.
And Matt, you've flown, I think, something like 350, 400 hours in a Spitfire. I think what everyone wants to know, most people would love to have a flight in a Spitfire at some point in their lives, but what's it like?
It's the most amazingly freeing feeling. You sit in this airplane, and your head sticks out of this sort of clear bubble, and you have an enormous amount of power and agility at your hands, and it'll go and do whatever you tell it to do. A modern aircraft has all sorts of systems built into it that stops you doing that necessarily, that thinks it knows better. But this aeroplane will just give you the ultimate freedom, and that's an incredible feeling. To feel like they are your own wings, to stop thinking about flying an airplane, to stop thinking about your hands and your feet moving. You just see a cloud, you want to fly to it, you want to fly down the other side of it, you can. And that's an exceptional thing to do.
Every pilot I've ever talked to who's flown a Spitfire always says the thing about a Spitfire is it's a real thoroughbred, and I think you'd probably go along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about engineering from 80 years ago, absolutely exquisite engineering, with a Rolls-Royce Merlin in the front, and 1,750 horsepower. Put that into context of the cars you drive these days to give you a sense, and the airplane's not that much bigger than them, So it really is an absolute thoroughbred, as you say, and well, let's hope the engine will keep beating for the duration of this trip.
Well, I'm sure it will, and we'll go on to that in a moment. But one of the things, there's an old adage about aircraft, and that is that if it looks right, it probably is right, and conversely, if it looks a complete dog, it probably is a complete dog. The point about the Spitfire is it's the perfect blend of form and function, and actually that's what you're doing here with IWC as well, isn't it?
And I think what I'm really fascinated with is the design and engineering aspect. If you see this plane really in all the detail, and you see that this was built really to technical requirements, it was built to be a high performance fighter plane, and a very fast and agile plane as you describe it. But the result is something which has such a beauty and such a nonchalance in the overall aesthetic. And this elegance I'm really totally struck with. And this is also what links back also to the military watches, because what makes them so attractive is that these watches, initially like the plane, have been built initially pure to military specification. They had technical specifications, they had no design, they had some requirements, and the result of this was a very iconic design in the case of the Spitfire, but also in the case of pilots' watches in general. And this is still what is valid today, also with a new collection we relaunched, that we pick up these codes, but the result is something which has a timeless purity, which is still fascinating these times.
Absolutely, and one of the things that you should know about the Spitfire, of course, is that although it's first flown in 1936, it did go on to make 22 main different variants and a few other variants as well. And it's that ability of the basic brilliance, genius of its initial design, which enabled it to be upgraded all the time. And again, I don't want to draw on these parallels with IWC, but the aviation watch of 1936, you can see how it's been upgraded and progressed over the intervening years. What you should also know is that Steve and Matt set up the Boultbee Flight Academy some years ago, and this is the only place in the entire world, ladies and gents, where you can learn to fly a Spitfire. So I'm interested how, chaps, you got from that sort of seed of an idea to taking a Spitfire around the world, because from where I'm standing, that's quite an amazing and bold idea.
Well, we bought a two-seat Spitfire in auction about 10 years ago. And there's something about flight that inspires man. And being up there in the sky, in a Spitfire, you train in various planes, and they're quite wide, and you sit, and it's a bit like a car. You're on this big couch, and you're flying along. But when you get into Spitfire, you sort of put it on, and you wear it, and it's about the size of this seat. And it's like being like Iron Man. You move the stick and your whole body just goes woof, woof. And there's a joy and a freedom and an elegance to it. And so our goal was, this elegance is kept to a very few people in the world who are fortunate enough to own them. How do we get that to more people? How do we get it to the general public? There are so many aviation enthusiasts. So we set up the Flight Academy with that goal in mind, buying this machine that was originally flew in South Africa. And so having set the school up, the idea was, well, maybe one day we should fly. My idea was to fly to South Africa. I thought that would be nice. But Matt said, no, we've got to go around the world.
So Matt, I mean, that's quite a leap of faith to come up with this idea. I mean, it's a big idea, isn't it? And I think you should understand, ladies and gents, that this is not an easy undertaking at all. It's not a question of just getting into your Spitfire, taking off, and sort of beetling around the world. There's jeopardy here, isn't it?
Yeah, there is jeopardy. Obviously, we're trying to do everything we can to minimize that in the planning stages. Like Steve said, when we set the Academy up, our aim was to inspire. And as a result of the relationships we've built over the last few years, we were given the opportunity to buy this aircraft, which is a particularly historic aircraft, a particularly original aircraft, because it spent most of its life in a museum. That means that pretty much every part of it was as built back in 1943. So given the opportunity, we thought we need to do something that's in line with our initial MO for the company, and that is to inspire. So how do we do it with an airplane you can't put someone in the back of? And I thought was, well, rather than the sort of two-seat variant and what we're doing, we'll take it to other people. So the aim is to engage with as many people as we can around the world. We're not going to fly at 20,000 feet. We're going to fly at 1,000 feet so people can see it and wave, and we can wave back and see what's going on the ground so we can engage. And then we're stopping at numerous places to talk and to engage and to really let people get up close and touch it and see what it's all about and share, really share our passion with it.
And how many people do you think are going to be able to see the Spitfire flying for live?
Live's a difficult question. When we sort of built the concept and looked at how we were going to inspire, and this is where IWC plays such a huge important part in this project for us. Was we want to inspire people, but we're a small group of people. There are 10 of us maximum in the business. We're not storytellers, but we're doing something that is worthy of people knowing in our humble view. So IWC sort of agreed to come on board, and there are so many similarities. Steve and I, both engineers. My first watch, and it sounds very convenient to say, it was an IWC. When we first set the business up, I got in contact with them and said, we should do something together because we have such similar goals. So to be sitting up here now in front of everyone and this happening is an incredibly exciting thing because we have, so many similar ideals. Well, you have to run me the question.
So let's go through the route. So you're going westward first, Scotland, Iceland, Greenland. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So we're rather than going with the wind, the traditional way is around the sort of east around the world. We're heading westbound, where the low-level wind doesn't affect us as much, and that gives us an extra hour a day, basically, to our benefit. So that's the basic plan. We go through. Iceland, Greenland, northern Canada, and then across the States, up through Alaska into northern Russia, down in Japan, and then through the Middle East and home.
So the Bering Straits, I mean, we all know that is a name to kind of sort of chill the blood, but is that going to be particularly challenging, do you think?
Steve's got a bit of experience in the Bering Strait, so I'll let him answer this one.
Well, I was the first person to drive across the Bering Straits in an expedition about 15 years ago. So it's a part of the world I know very well, and the Alaskans are so full of adventure, as are the Russians. They're incredible people up in Chukotka, and so that's a part I'm really looking forward to.
Are you going to fly this part of the route?
Yeah, well, we'll be flying, taking in turns each day. So, yes, very much so. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
You proposed to your wife up there, didn't you?
I did actually propose to my wife up there. I proposed on top of a hill in -40.
When you're on top of the world?
We were on top of a mountain looking at Russia in this expedition vehicle, just the two of us. And then I proposed to her, and she said yes. And then I said, okay, we better get back because it's -40. And then the tracks was jammed, and the thing was frozen, and I hadn't told anyone where we were going. so
it might be the shortest engagement ever.
And so I said, the only thing we can do is just drop off the top of the mountain and see what happens. So he sort of fell off this mountain towards the sea. So I remember it quite well.
well, man has always had a spirit of adventure, and ever since the machine age, there has always been this harnessing of man's desire to push things further and blend it with machinery. And of course, you're no stranger to this adventurous spirit, Steve, because I've been in a helicopter from pole to pole.
Yeah, indeed. No one had flown from the North Pole to the South Pole, and that seemed like a nice challenge, because the North Pole is an ocean surrounded by land, so it's constantly moving. So when you land there, there's nothing there. You land at the North Pole, and 5 minutes later, you've drifted off it. Whereas the South Pole is land surrounded by an ocean. So there's a post. So we landed on the North Pole, spent the night on the North Pole, and then flew down through the Americas and then across Antarctica to the South Pole, which was very beautiful.
So just tell me a little bit more about the actual project. I mean, how are you going to, the logistics of it? So there's going to be the Silver Spitfire, and then, what do you have in terms of support?
I mean, the first thing we've done is put the aircraft through a complete restoration. So it came from a museum, as I mentioned. We rolled it in there and went to see it 3 months later, and it was 20,000 parts across the floor of the hangar, which was a devastating moment. You'll be pleased to see, if you go to the IWC booth now, the airplane is there in most of its component parts, so it's very, very close to complete. So it's lovely that we're getting closer. That means it's been looked at really from every single rivet, every one of the 40,000 rivets that hold it together that have been replaced. Alongside, we're taking a Pilatus PC-12 that will help us. We'll take our engineer with us. We'll take spare parts. And in certain places where fuel is difficult to get hold of, we'll carry fuel for us too. So yeah, the planning stage is really well and truly, as you can imagine, underway. We've got another 5-6 months to go, and there's still stuff to cover. We're off to China in a week's time to talk to them about allowing us to fly through their airspace, because the rules that govern Chinese airspace are very different than ours. So very excited about that part and very hopeful that we can make that happen.
And if you do, you'll be the first time a Spitfire's ever flown over the Great Wall of China, is that correct?
That's right, yeah, and that will be a huge moment if we're able to achieve that, so very exciting. One of the main aims of the expedition from the outset was to marry this beautiful piece of engineering against other exceptional human endeavors around the world, such as the Great Wall of China, the pyramids of Giza, the Petra, and photograph that and record the two of them together. So yeah, I think we're fingers crossed that the China bit happens, because that would be a particularly special part of the story.
And also, there's a whole educational side of it, isn't it? And if I understand it, you're going to be beaming into classrooms around the world from the cockpit and all sorts of other exciting things to sort of spread the word of what you're doing.
Well, we're really keen to inspire people. That's what it's all about, and especially the next generation. And so we're going to be connected up satellite-wise and be able to broadcast information, because life's made up of these tiny little special moments. You work and work and work, and there's just a moment, and a moment of flying over the Great Wall of China with a Spitfire wing dropping down, to share that with the younger generation and to get young boys and young girls interested and involved in aviation, because it is the freedom of mankind. Somehow that greater atmosphere playing up there, not just being stuck here like worms on the ground, to get up there and to get their imagination up there is terribly important to us.
And IWC will be with them all the way, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. I think this makes it so fascinating that, I mean, we share aviation history with a couple of other watch brands, but what makes IWC unique is really that we're able to translate this into something which is relevant here and now. And this flight is taking place this year, and these gentlemen are here with us today. And especially what you mentioned, modern technology allows us really to follow this flight on several media 24/7. And we have 360 cameras in the cockpit, which allows also people who are interested to experience what it's like to be on a Spitfire, what this cockpit is about, what timekeeping, what aviation is about. But especially also this flight around the world is relevant to us as a global brand. I mean, they will have stopovers in 26 countries. And we as an international brand, we have in many of these countries, we have customers, we have boutiques, and we will also activate these stopovers with interesting events for our customers, for our guests. We bring wherever possible, we bring our brand ambassadors over. We will have interesting encounters with other partnerships we have as a brand, like the Formula One race in Abu Dhabi. We'll have the final, and they will meet with the other big partner of IWC, the Mercedes Formula One team. We meet with Fondation Antoine de Saint-Exupéry in Paris. So there's a lot of exciting encounters we want to activate as a brand, and this makes this so interesting for us as well.
And Matt, you're just going to say, you've talked so eloquently about what it's like flying the Spitfire, but what does it mean to you to fly this piece of history?
Oh, it's a huge honour. There isn't a pilot in the country, in many countries around the world, that wouldn't, swap the place just to have one chance at this. I probably know 25 Spitfire pilots, and I've had 25 messages saying that if either of us drop out, please put their names forward. They'll be more than willing to take 4 months off work, and they'll deal with the consequences on the way when they got back to be a part of it. It's a huge honour. What I wanted to say, to round up what I was saying earlier about the connection between us as individuals and the Boultbee Flight Academy and IWC, notwithstanding our engineering interest. But you know what? is that there's great integrity, I think, in this relationship, because we're doing the trip. IWC have a history with the watches, have a history with the aircraft, but what they do so fantastically is tell the story. So we're focused on our trip, we're focused on making it work, and what they're doing brilliantly is banging the gong that we would be unable to bang. So we thank them for that and really look forward to the next 6 months to a year of making it as successful as possible. I cannot think of a better partner we could have.
Just before we go and wrap it up, just tell me the key date markers that we need to be excited about? Between now and the end of the trip?
Yeah, so I guess the key date, first flight of the aeroplane, beginning of June, post-restoration. That's the first time it'll have flown since 1956, so that in itself will be quite a moment. We have to do a lot testing the systems. We've had extra fuel tanks put in to increase the range. We've used sort of historical modifications to make that possible, to extend it to about 1,000 miles nautical range. We're then going to test higher flight and try and do around the UK on one sort of tank of fuel to see how that feels. We're going to get very cold because there's no heating in the cockpit at 20,000 feet. I think at best it'll be minus 25 degrees, so we've got some work to do there to make that a little bit more comfortable. And then the day we leave we're about 95% of the way there, but we think the 9th of August. And we're away.
And when will you expect to finish?
Just before Christmas this year.
Good.
Yeah.
That's amazing, and you've got some amazing engineers working on this, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. They're in the audience here somewhere, actually. Well, the chap that's coming with us, our chief engineer, and Martin Overall, who is responsible for restoring the aircraft too. So he's done a fantastic job. And like I said, if you haven't been to the booth, please go and have a look. It really is spectacular.
Yeah, I just second that. It is absolutely a thing of beauty, and you know, for all of you who know what a Spitfire looks like, it just looks an extra bit level. It's gone up to 11 out of 10 with its silvery, shiny finish. It looks absolutely just amazing. And when that is flying somewhere near you in the summer and late summer and autumn of this year, it'll be really, really, truly spectacular. So please do all come over to the IWC booth and have a look. It's not 100% complete yet, but you'll get a very good idea. And it is the plane that is going to be flying around the world. So thank you. Christian, Steve, Matt, thank you all very much.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
Jennifer, thank you. Great project. Really looking forward to that 9th of August.
Yeah.
Okay, it's in the calendar. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to those who have been watching online. We have another session at 4:30 p.m. Geneva time with Maison de Witt, and we're going to talk about inventing mechanical machines. See you later. Thank you for coming.